If there's anything I can give The Witch's House credit for, it's how effectively it's able to surprise the player. I would imagine that The Witch's House isn't a game you stumble upon without context. While it is a staple title in the vague category of RPG Maker horror, it's not one with a particularly fervent fan base, nor is it one of the most influential and critically acclaimed, nor is it the oldest of its kind. I would imagine most people played other notable titles well before they made their way to this one. That's not to mention that as a computer game with mature themes, you're much less likely to stumble upon this or any of its contemporaries for that matter than a well-oiled console experience for all audiences. I think that's something that works well in its favor. I mean, just look at it. The title screen is this beautiful, impressionistic array of cool colors scored to a calming orchestral theme. It exudes elegance immediately. It starts you off in a gorgeous forest setting with pixel art so detailed and well animated that you can see hair and clothing and leaves moving in the wind, shade dynamically covering the ground, and you too as you walk underneath. The sound of the wind blowing serves as soft ambiance to the scene. Simple tutorials pop up, quickly teaching you the game's mechanics. Perhaps a cat engages you in conversation. You enter the mansion and are treated to a subtle cinematic shot as the camera pans up to the titular witch's house. Then you walk forward and die. One of the first things you learn about the witch's house is that it's very easy to die. Walk into an obvious trap and it will simply kill you. Fail a puzzle, it will often kill you. Get involved with anything ominous, it will probably send something to kill you. And spend too much time out of danger, you'll quickly find it again. And sometimes the game just kills you as a joke. And all of this can happen without much pomp and circumstance to it. You die within a few seconds, usually in some ridiculous or gory fashion, and then it immediately cuts to a game over screen. Return to title with that beautiful theme playing almost like a joke at your expense. Describing all this in a vacuum may not make clear just how unusual it is. Of course, it's a horror game, right? And even if we ignore the greater gaming landscape where nowadays most developers are too scared to pull one over on the player, this specific formula is rare even among its ilk. In other RPG Maker horror games, there might be no hard failsafe, or there might be a health system that prevents instant death, or dying leads to an elaborately detailed ending that provides more of a narrative to failure than just resetting. And usually there's not nearly as many opportunities for death, let alone unique deaths, unless the game is centered around combat. The closest other game I could think of would be Misao, but Misao not only has less unique deaths to its name, it's also mostly copying Quartz Party, which is a much more traditional or rather foundational game in its genre. Also, Misao isn't as good as The Witch's House. If anything, I might say it's more similar to the ROM hack colloquially known as Kaizo Mario World, and other such hyper-difficult modified platformers. It uses the visual language of something where death is fair and rare, but to the effect of making a difficult experience where death is inevitable and common. While there is a base set of character mechanics that stay intact, going from level to level you'll often find drastic, wild changes in the elements and ideas used. Except instead of doing this for an established side-scrolling platformer, it's an original property that does it with a top-down game where you solve puzzles. It's almost like Kaizo-ebe. You have the same idea of two-dimensional movement, item puzzles, and horror themes with a different twist to it. And those types of games are not only usually confined to a single genre, but also to specific mediums, like old Flash games you'd find online or in ROM hacks or mods. Which is why The Witch's House is not only surprising for its uniqueness, but appealing in that way too. Like, they released this on consoles, that's pretty cool. A bit of a tangent, but this isn't just a unique quality, but arguably effective in the goal of being a horror game. Computer games as a medium offer a unique look into how truly dangerous a threat might be by giving you the chance to actually die because of it. Whenever you see something that looks dangerous, now you know that it really will kill you if you mess up. In some cases, this is used only for short bursts of terror, but generally it can be said that there's a constant unease that interacting with the wrong thing or going somewhere you shouldn't will lead to sudden, loud, bloody demise. And that's exactly the feeling a scary game like this should be attempting to instill in the player. Jump scares also get me. Anyway, more than in just the commonality of death though, there's something about The Witch's House generally that comes across as particularly gamey compared to its counterparts. A lot of other RPG Maker horror games are heavy on narrative experience, but The Witch's House is relatively light for most of its run. The only glimpses of textual story being short conversations with the black cat and optional looks at the witch's diary. The cat has little to say and is genuinely casual and nonchalant about the situation, the game itself being unconcerned with the existence of a talking cat, with the silent protagonist not even reacting. Meanwhile, the witch's diary is blunt and if I can be honest, dry in its delivery of a tragic tale. Even some aspects of the tragedy may seem well tried for anyone who's a fan of edgy media. The whole "my parents died" backstory is pretty common, even if the "I killed my parents" variant is a little less common. This game is basically all about solving puzzles one after another. The layout of the house changes, practically admitting to being nonsensical, and even the construction of the puzzles carries that same feeling. The parameters and solutions don't rely on pre-established rules and items, but on whatever a given area happens to be about. And then when you solve a puzzle, the door forward opens up. The game makes it a point that keys don't unlock doors, which also brings into focus why keys exist in other games. It's not like you can use keys on multiple doors in most of these games, so the form and arguably the presence of a key is ultimately arbitrary. But it exists because it serves as a logical tie from the puzzle you solved to making progress. Of course, doing some math to open a door was arbitrary, but it helped you find where the key was, and that's visible progress. There's a logical through line for the sake of upholding your suspension of belief in the world, a commitment to real-life logic. The Witch's House rejects that. It says, no, the doors just open. It's magic. That's the kind of thing I think is really quirky, right? I suppose it's being honest and efficient, but it sticks out on its own. Like, it's not even bothering with the pretense and just allowing you to play the game. I guess it's the same sort of feeling I might get playing a serious pants modern game with all its prestige and pompousness, and then jumping into a title with a simpler, more arcade-esque appeal. They're not breaking the fourth wall per se, they're not even lampshading, they just have the self-awareness of their own mechanics and the player's priorities, that it slightly draws attention to their nature as a game, as a work of fiction. And that's neat, I think. However, I think that in doing this, the game is subtly tricking you into making assumptions about the depth of its story. Usually I'd give a spoiler warning, but even by saying there's something to be spoiled, I feel that spoils part of it. Because yes, the story does take a rather sudden turn, and from what I've seen, it managed to surprise everyone who played it. I think a large part of that is because of what I said about its mechanical construction. When you think back to arcade games like I mentioned, or even most games before the fourth console generation, you don't tend to think of them as having much of a story at all beyond the basic context, let alone a sense of literary depth. Eat pellets, stomp Koopas, escape the witch's house. By emulating that same feeling, despite wearing the suit of a subgenre well known for its storytelling, you come not to expect much of the game. Even the construction of the snippets of story it does present lend to this. The important parts of this story take place in the witch's diary, which, as I've said, detail a simple tale of a victim of tragedy turned supernatural evil. The diary is actually surprisingly deliberate in what it tells you. None of the entries delve into the mechanics of being a witch or magic itself, with one secret exception. It's deliberately avoiding anything except the bare necessary details here. Eventually, the diary seems to describe the present events of the game, detailing a girl with golden braids coming to the house to play. The next entry says she won't be killed because she can cure the witch's sickness. This brings to mind an instance where the purple-haired apparition saves the protagonist. The final entry details how the witch intends to take the body of her friend, explicitly naming Viola, the player character. With impeccable timing, a decrepit, legless version of the purple-haired girl comes out and chases the player. From here, one of the longest and possibly most difficult chases in the game, the narrative seems completely clear. The game hasn't called attention to any other loose ends. And so, getting the normal ending, you simply run off and escape, a totally straightforward narrative meant only to loosely justify a very gamey game. So you might think. Even here, the game implies there's more, though, not just with the literal question mark teaser and show of the cat, but the little hint of the letter which said that Ellen was Viola's friend well before this, and they played a lot. While on its own, it's not enough to indicate the twist, it paints some of the narrative in a different light, implying those presumably present tense diary entries were past tense. I would also say there's an equal chance that the player will go straight for the true ending. There's a hidden drawer near the beginning of the house with the note opens when the house returns to normal. In a game like this, it might not strike the player as the most essential thing ever, only becoming the obvious loose end during the normal end tease. If you go there during the final chase and manage to escape, you'll be able to get Ellen's knife. It doesn't do anything as an item, it doesn't serve as some key or tool of defense, but it triggers a whole different ending. No flowery description of the scene can really stack up to the utter strength of its execution, so I'll just say that as you're approached by the legless witch Ellen, Viola suddenly starts to talk. Fumi, the game's creator, stated the inspiration behind the witch's house in an interview. Quote, "It all started from a thought I had when I played Eve by Corey. It's scary when the main character suddenly speaks." And seeing the scene, I can't help but agree. The tone immediately shifts into unsettling, backed up by a change in visual effects and soundtrack. And this is where it's revealed. The body switching spell already happened. In this moment, although we may have a mental map of the characters of Viola and Ellen the Witch, we've only really been around Ellen and Viola's body. However, I feel that instinctively we just switch those schemas around. Now, all the attachment we had to the helpless protagonist is given to the dying girl, and our fear and hatred of the antagonist is given to the one in Viola's body. The game rubs in the tragedy of the real Viola's torturous death by having this be an utter betrayal by someone she perceived to be a true friend, and to add the ultimate salt in the wound, Viola's father comes and, thinking he's defending his daughter, shoots the legless girl, and thus the real witch goes free. I don't think it's an understatement to say that this scene makes The Witch's House. Without it, the game would be decent at its unique style of arcade-like puzzles and black comedy horror, but somewhat unexceptional. But it not only rises above that, it uses exactly that to do so. It makes you laugh and makes you scared, and then when it seems like it's about to let you go, when it's got you in a certain state of mind and assures you that you can let your guard down, it hits you with back-to-back twists and revelations, all of them pointing to the most depressing outcome possible. The more you think about it, the more you reflect on your experience playing the game, the gloomier it becomes. The character you thought you were rooting for this whole time died in pain and despair. And the antagonist you thought you were fighting against, this witch who inflicted countless deaths upon not just you the player, but upon countless other souls, upon the character you came to care for, she escapes justice completely. All along, their fates were unavoidable, and now the evil witch is free of the witch's house. Alright, video's basically done. I have some more stuff to say, but it's all different topics from the structured essay I was going for about what the game does well. Here we go. If there's any flaw I can point out about The Witch's House, it's that despite its mechanical and narrative excellence, there's no greater thesis to latch onto. Again, quoting that interview with Fumi, there isn't any special message built into the game. I just hope that people will have a fun time playing it. And yeah, while the game was mechanically fun and narratively effective, I think that this is the reason why it hasn't had the titanic status of other RPG Maker horror games. Yume Nikki is renowned as a glorious, surrealistic depiction of dreams. Ebe is a beautiful exploration of art through a living gallery. Quartz Party is an emotional tragedy about dealing with loss. Then there's The Crooked Man, Amori, Off, so on and so forth. You get the point. It's odd to even compare those games on those grounds because their themes are woven into every aspect of the experience, but there's no equally grounding idea in The Witch's House. That's not to say every game needs to have some depthful, artsy core concept in order to be a great game, just that in this case, it might have helped to push The Witch's House just over the finish line into absolute excellence. On that note, there was one way the game could have solved that problem. In 2017, Fumi penned a prequel novel titled The Witch's House: The Diary of Ellen. It was adapted into a 9-part manga series illustrated by Yuna Kagesaki. This is really interesting to me. I just love it when RPG Maker horror games get extra media. So, is it any good? Well, it doesn't have quite the same appeal as the game, and it inherently lacks that factor of surprise I said made it work so well. It does have very beautiful art and expresses some of the hidden aspects of the lore in an acceptably entertaining way, though. I would argue, though, that it doesn't fulfill what I would have wanted out of any spin-off media, which would be having a theme. It doesn't have to retroactively make the game about a particular theme, but it could have done so itself and been standalone. Instead, it's sort of retreading a lot of the same backstory that existed in the main game while fleshing out more concepts and events. Personally, I didn't feel they needed much elaboration as I felt the game stood strong from its mechanics, yes, but also from its charming vibe, the characters, and their drama. And in that regard, the story also falters. For one thing, it's not clear how sympathetically we're supposed to view Ellen. The first few chapters depict her as a tortured soul and play with some interesting psychological concepts. But then, within the space of a single chapter, she goes from reluctantly killing our first friend to committing mass murder and enjoying it. Her new selfish personality is a bit interesting, but the transition was too abrupt. The level of detail is so inconsistent and lacking at the worst possible time. Though, making her too sympathetic might have undermined the story of the game anyway, so this only succeeds in hurting the prequel as its own story. And then there's Viola, who is depicted as endlessly nice and a little too innocent for her own good. I would relate to her more if I could perceive her as a realistic character with human flaws, which is easier to do when I think I'm playing as her, and imagining her as a manifestation of myself, but not as easy in a different medium. As it is, she's just a little bit too blatantly a sopping wet puppy dog. Ultimately, I'm not sure if this was the most necessary supplemental material to produce. And that's primarily because, in 2018, The Witch's House was remade into The Witch's House MV, made in RPG Maker MV, and published by Dongen Entertainment, later released for consoles in 2022. If you're not Too up to date, you might better recognize its 2012 freeware version made in RPG Maker VX. I use the remake in my footage because it looks nicer. Having played both versions in my lifetime, I think that MV was a better version, not only looking beautiful, but having all the content of the original, unaltered, and then a little bit more in the form of the separated extra mode. Extra mode is a version of the game that follows the same beats, but makes a lot of puzzles much more complicated and difficult, and changes some of the text basically to go along with the story of the prequel, delivering it in its own sort of way. If the normal game was Kaizo Ebe, the extra mode is the Celeste Strawberry Jam of Corpse Party, I don't know. Which is to say that unless you have a tolerance for difficulty that borders on unfair, solutions so obscure you absolutely need a guide, and needing to do the same section over a few times, it's hard to recommend. Especially since you could read the prequel and come away knowing the same story and information. However, it's also extremely funny. Dying right before a checkpoint, something jumps out at you and kills you, a teddy bear conspiracy? Hilarious. The only downside to The Witch's House MV is that the price might be a little steep, as this game isn't very long, nor does it have the sort of prestige that might earn it the price tag. If you want to support the creator or you just have that money burning a hole in your pocket though, I can vouch for its quality and authenticity. So might as well if you can. That's all I have to say really. Basically talked about everything after all. Bye bye.